Well, good evening once again. Day 108 of the Biden administration, and the opposition to the Biden administration, a.k.a. the Republican Party, is not only firmly in the grip of Donald Trump. Tonight, two of his most devoted acolytes are on the road pushing the big lie to a crowd of loyal Trump supporters. Congressman Matt Gaetz, who happens to be currently under federal investigation for possible sex trafficking, and Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, a conspiracy theorist and QAnon supporter, joined forces tonight to launch an America First tour with a rally at the largest retirement community in our country, the Villages in Florida.
We have never abandoned Trump, and he has never abandoned America. If Liz Cheney could even find Wyoming on a map and went there, she would find a lot of very angry cowboys who are not happy with the fact that she's sort of for every war. War in Syria, for it. War against Trump and his supporters, for it. War against the Republican conference, war against her own voters. And it appears that Liz Cheney may no longer be the chair of the Republican conference. This might be the first war she's ever sought to end.
The Democrats that say they won the presidential race, the Democrats that are working very, very hard and very fast and aggressively to pass their socialist agenda, you are not going to put us down for loving President Trump and what he did for the past 4 years.
This comes at the end of a week in which we witnessed Republicans set in motion the removal of Congresswoman Liz Cheney from the leadership bracket in the House for the crime of rejecting the big lie and actually saying Joe Biden won the election. Washington Post out with new reporting on how the ousting of Republicans like Cheney and control of the party are now at the top of Donald Trump's post-White House agenda. They write that Trump is now, quote, refashioning himself as the president of the Republican states of America and reshaping the party in ways both micro and macro. He has privately revived his claims that he plans to run for president again in 2024 and is propelled primarily by a thirst for retribution, an insatiable quest for the spotlight, and a desire to establish and maintain total dominance and control over the Republican base. New York Times notes that the party now sees reigniting its culture wars as their way back to the White House and majorities in Congress. The party is focused on, quote, polarizing issues that stoke conservative outrage, like the court expansion bill, calls to defund the police, which many Democrats oppose, and efforts to provide legal status to undocumented immigrants and grant statehood to the District of Columbia. Even as Trump and his allies focus on future elections, the Washington Post has another disturbing report about how Donald Trump's Justice Department secretly obtained the phone records of Washington Post journalists and tried to obtain their email records over reporting they did in the early months of the administration on Russia's role in our 2016 election. Here is what Trump was saying during those initial months in office.
I've actually called the Justice Department to look into the leaks. Those are criminal leaks. I want the Attorney General to be much tougher on the leaks.
So there you have it. Right now, Republicans in several states where they control the legislatures are putting all of their efforts into making it harder to vote. Bills introduced in the Ohio House would limit mail-in balloting and reduce early voting. This morning, Texas lawmakers passed a bill that would roll back access to the ballot. That comes just a day after Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed that measure that also restricts voting in his state. He even held it up to show it off just the way Donald Trump used to. Susan, I would like to start with you. This road show in Florida, one member of Congress under federal investigation, the other a QAnon enthusiast. What does it tell you about the state of the party and the depth of the control by one man?
Yeah, you know, some people thought we were heading into a post-Trump era for the Republican Party with his defeat for re-election. That is clearly not true. It is still Trump's Republican Party in which Matt Gaetz is welcome, and Liz Cheney, daughter of the former vice president, herself a veteran member of the Republican establishment is not welcome. You know, this is not the customary treatment of losing presidential candidates. Typically, their party finds them to be persona non grata. Not the case with Donald Trump, whose control of the party includes not just big picture things like what does the party stand for, what's this message, but down to small things like who's going to challenge incumbent Republicans like Liz Cheney in their home state primaries.
Peter Baker, our mutual friend Carl Hulse of your paper, writes that Republicans are reviving the battles over cultural issues, but the White House strategy has been to not engage on that level. Is that sustainable for the Biden White House as they are kind of putting their heads down and pushing through, or trying to?
Yeah, I think they don't want to get distracted from their agenda. Their agenda, of course, is pretty expansive already. They have these $4 trillion in spending bills you mentioned to build infrastructure and expand the social safety net. They've got an immigration overhaul plan they would like to push through. They've got climate initiatives that they're focused on. And they understand that every minute they spend talking about Dr. Seuss or some other, cultural wedge issue that the Republicans would like to focus on is a moment lost in terms of pushing through that agenda. So they have a kind of discipline we often don't see in Washington so far. And we'll see eventually at some point, of course, President Biden could be, enticed into that conversation. But for the most part, he's shown, especially for a guy who spent a lifetime in Washington, kind of popping off sort of ad hoc, he has shown a remarkable, message discipline that we had not used to from Joe Biden.
Susan, get us back into politics, specifically the Republican Party. Are you mystified at the speed of the eclipse of Liz Cheney, helped along by the public directed groveling of Congresswoman Stefanik right to Trump, hoping that Trump, through McCarthy, she will get that job?
Stefanik, who was, of course, a big critic of Trump at one point, and has a much more moderate voting record than Liz Cheney does. Yes, I think it is a sign of exactly where the Republican Party is these days. And, we're now in a situation where even though Trump is out of office, the people in the Republican Party who held office and opposed Trump are now either not Republicans, or they're no longer in office, or they decided to stay silent. There is almost no voice being raised within the GOP at odds with the debunked claim by President Trump that he actually won the election last November.
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. You should know that you can follow today's top stories and breaking news and catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.